Thunder roared like cannon fire across the vast prairie, shaking the very bones of the earth beneath a sky that churned dark as coal smoke. Lightning streaked furiously, illuminating sheets of rain pounding mercilessly upon the barren land, flooding paths into muddy, impassable torrents. Amidst this tempest, a solitary cabin struggled to remain upright against the relentless fury. Each gust of wind battered its wooden frame, rattling windows and doors, as if nature itself sought to erase any trace of human intrusion. Inside, 7-year-old Sarah stood frozen near the window, eyes wide with dread. Her tiny hands trembled, pressed tightly against the glass, watching the darkness swirl violently beyond. Her breathing came shallow and quick, reflecting her fear, yet marked by a determination beyond her years. Beside her, on a rough straw mattress in the corner of the cabin's humble room, Margaret, her mother, lay writhing in pain. Sweat glistened across Margaret's pale forehead. Strands of damp hair clung to her flushed cheeks, highlighting the agony consuming her body. "Sarah." Margaret's voice strained against pain, yet carried warmth and urgency. "Sarah, it's too soon. I need help." Sarah turned sharply, rushing to her mother's side. Her small frame shook under the weight of an impossible responsibility, her eyes frantic with worry. "Mama, nobody's coming. I called out. Nobody hears." Margaret grimaced again, gripping her stomach fiercely as waves of unbearable pain seized her. A scream escaped, muffled by clenched teeth. Sarah recoiled, tears streaking silently down her face, knowing she must do something, but unsure how or where to begin. She reached instinctively toward a worn photograph placed carefully on a nearby shelf, an image of her father, Daniel, captured smiling and strong, a testament to strength long vanished. Sarah felt a pang of loss sharply, remorseless, embering the comfort his presence once brought. Daniel had taught her courage, his voice steady in her memory, whispering lessons of strength against adversity. But Daniel was gone, buried beneath prairie soil, leaving Sarah and Margaret alone against a harsh frontier. "Mama!" Sarah whispered urgently, gathering the remains of her courage. "I'll find someone. I promise." Margaret tried to protest weakly, her voice fading as another pain overwhelmed her senses, pulling her into darkness. Sarah hesitated only briefly, heart pounding, before grabbing a thin shawl draped across a wooden chair. Wrapping it tightly around herself, she opened the cabin door and stepped defiantly into the storm. Outside, chaos ruled. Wind ripped the shawl from her grasp instantly, sending it spiraling into darkness. Sarah stumbled forward anyway, driven by fear stronger than any storm, forcing her small legs to push through waterlogged grass and sinking mud. Each step seemed impossibly heavy, as though the land itself was determined to slow her progress. Yet the memory of her mother's suffering compelled her forward, giving her strength even amidst overwhelming terror. Nearby cabins dotted the horizon, dim lights flickering weakly against the maelstrom, windows shuttered tight, indifferent to Sarah's desperation. She stumbled toward the nearest house, banging on its door frantically. "Please, help us!" Her voice was drowned instantly by wind and rain. No one responded. Doors stayed closed, occupants hidden within their own fears and safety, unwilling or unable to hear the pleading cries of a frightened child. Despair threatened to crush Sarah's spirit, but another flash of lightning illuminated something else in the distance. A barn, its large silhouette looming sturdily amidst the storm's chaos. Instinctively, Sarah knew it belonged to the rancher, a man she had only ever glimpsed from afar, stern and solitary. Yet now he represented the last hope she had left. She moved toward it, determination rekindling despite fatigue. Each exhausting step brought her closer until she reached the barn's heavy doors, closed against the gale. Sarah tugged desperately, but they barely moved under her tiny hands. Her strength failing, she pounded instead, screaming above the storm, desperation raw in her voice. Please, someone. The door suddenly swung open, revealing a tall, rugged figure illuminated by a lantern's faint glow. Jack, the rancher, stood silhouetted in its flickering shadows, staring incredulously down at the drenched and trembling child before him. "Girl, what are you doing out here?" Jack's voice was gruff yet tinged with concern. His rough beard glistened with moisture, his broad shoulders heavy beneath layers of drenched wool. Jack's piercing blue eyes narrowed, scrutinizing Sarah intensely, clearly assessing danger or trickery. "My mama, she's dying," Sarah blurted out between sobs, shaking violently from cold and terror. "She's having the baby and nobody's helping." Jack's brow furrowed, jaw tightening. A sharp silence stretched between them, punctuated by thunder and rain. His past loomed heavily, losses etched deep into his soul. He hesitated, memories clawing back. Another stormy night, another cry for help unanswered. Ghosts haunted Jack relentlessly, reminding him of failures he'd sworn never to repeat. "Please," Sarah pleaded again, eyes wide and unyielding, reflecting Jack's own pain clearly in their innocence. He saw something powerful there, echoes of his past self, a desperation he recognized all too well. "Where's your place?" Jack finally said, voice quiet yet resolute, decision made. Sarah pointed urgently into darkness, toward the faint outline of her cabin, struggling visibly beneath the storm's assault. Without another word, Jack scooped Sarah effortlessly into strong arms, sheltering her from the wind as he moved swiftly toward the cabin. Inside his chest, Moyle raged nearly equal to the storm surrounding them. Jack remembered vividly the wife he lost, the child taken by illness, a past filled with agony he vowed never to revisit. Yet something deep within him stirred unexpectedly at Sarah's bravery. Her courage compelled him, reminded him that redemption might still exist amidst tragedy. The journey back seemed endless, each gust of wind threatening to topple Jack's steady gait. Sarah clung tightly, trusting implicitly now in his silent strength. Lightning split skies open once more, highlighting Margaret's cabin sharply ahead. Relief flooded Sarah's heart, though dread lingered. Uncertainty and fear mingled together, inseparable. Jack pushed open the cabin door fiercely, stepping into dim candlelight barely illuminating Margaret's suffering. He lowered Sarah carefully, assessing the room with practiced precision. Margaret lay frighteningly still, breaths shallow, skin pale as death. Jack's expression darkened, memories sharpening painfully. "Can you help her?" Sarah whispered desperately, hope trembling in her voice. Jack knelt silently, gently touching Margaret's forehead. Fever burned brightly beneath his fingers, confirming fears already forming. Yet his face remained stoic, betraying none of his internal dread. He'd seen death before, knew its icy touch intimately. But something defiant ignited deep within, spurred by the tiny, expectant eyes of Sarah beside him. "Fetch some water," Jack instructed gently but firmly, offering purpose to Sarah amidst the chaos. She moved swiftly, reassured by his authoritative calm, strength drawn from shared resolve. Alone momentarily beside Margaret, Jack leaned closer, whispering determinedly into ears that might never hear him clearly again. "Hold on," he murmured softly, voice thick with restrained emotion. "For your girl's sake, hold on." Sarah returned swiftly, water sloss hing from her small hands. Jack took it gratefully, using torn cloth strips to dampen Margaret's forehead gently, soothing feverish heat. He moved with practiced care, instincts honed from years alone on the prairie, tending injured animals, fighting bitter elements, battling internal demons nightly. Sarah watched him closely, awe and gratitude blossoming in her heart. Jack's presence brought a steadiness absent since her father's passing, sparking hope amidst despair. Though fear lingered sharply, uncertainty deepening shadows still further, she drew courage simply from watching his quiet strength unfold. Outside, the storm gradually softened, thunder retreating into distant murmurs, as if nature itself sensed humanity's struggle within the tiny cabin. Sarah noticed subtly how Jack's posture changed, tension ebbing gradually into determined calm, steeled now against whatever hardships lay ahead. "Will Mama live?" Sarah whispered nervously, eyes pleading reassurance. Jack paused, carefully meeting Sarah's frightened gaze. "We'll see her through, girl. I promise," he said, voice firm yet tenderly protective. Sarah felt the words resonate deeply, realizing trust had bloomed quietly amidst shared adversity. Exhaustion finally overtook her tiny frame. Sarah curled beside her mother, eyes fluttering shut, despite fears still circling overhead. She drifted slowly, comforted by Jack's vigilant presence nearby, senses numbed into a fragile peace. Jack stayed watchful, keeping silent vigil as night's darkness gradually softened toward dawn's pale promise. He knew trials awaited with daylight's return, yet newfound purpose filled his chest, binding him firmly now to Sarah's small family. Within tragedy's shadow, redemption beckoned softly, promising strength drawn not from solitude, but from bonds forged fiercely amidst life's harshest storms. Section 2. Trust in the Wilderness. Dawn broke timidly over the prairie, casting pale, hesitant rays of sunlight upon the storm-ravaged land. Sarah awoke slowly, consciousness filtering through exhaustion and worry. She blinked her heavy eyelids open, startled by the sharp clarity of the world around her. The previous night's horrors returned instantly, flooding her heart with dread. But beside her, Margaret still breathed, shallow yet steady breaths that sparked fragile hope. Across the room, Jack sat vigilantly by Margaret's bedside, his gaze intent, lined with exhaustion but unwavering. Shadows under his eyes revealed sleepless vigilance, yet strength emanated quietly from his posture. Sarah watched him silently, her young heart sensing that something profound had changed within the rancher. He was no longer simply a distant stranger. He had become a protector, an unexpected guardian, born from tragedy. Margaret stirred weakly, breaking the heavy silence. Jack leaned in, gently resting a reassuring hand upon her forehead. Fever still raged beneath his touch, and concern etched deeply into his weathered face. Sarah crept closer, drawn instinctively toward his steady calmness. "She'll make it, won't she?" Sarah's small voice trembled, yet carried a bravery Jack had grown quickly to admire. Jack offered her a softened gaze. "She's fighting hard, Sarah. We're here. We'll help her keep fighting." Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps outside broke their shared tension. Jack stiffened immediately, body alert and tense. He rose cautiously, eyes narrowing toward the door, hand unconsciously moving toward the revolver at his belt. The prairie was harsh, strangers rarely friendly, especially so soon after a storm. The door creaked open carefully, revealing a tall, enigmatic figure silhouetted against the golden dawn. The newcomer stepped slowly into the cabin, fear, tears illuminated by gentle sunlight. His appearance was striking. A Native American warrior, clearly seasoned by years of life on the plains. His presence radiated quiet authority, tempered by wisdom earned through hardship. Jack's hand tightened instinctively on his weapon. The warrior held his hands outward calmly, signifying peace. His dark eyes met Jack's piercing blue ones, reflecting quiet understanding beneath an unreadable expression. Sarah watched the silent exchange, sensing the palpable tension. Finally the newcomer spoke, his voice deep, resonant yet gentle. "My name is Hawk. The storm was fierce, spirits restless. I came to help." Jack studied Hawk skeptically, memories and old prejudices clouding his judgment. He had learned to distrust outsiders, hardened by betrayal and loss. Yet Margaret's faint, labored breathing reminded him of their dire need. Pride and suspicion were luxuries they could ill afford. Jack slowly lowered his hand, reluctantly granting Hawk cautious acceptance. "Can you help her?" Jack asked warily, nodding toward Margaret. Hawk moved silently across the small room, kneeling beside Margaret, assessing her condition carefully. His movements were precise, efficient, carrying knowledge passed down through generations. With calm precision, he produced a small leather pouch from beneath his cloak, extracting herbs and powders foreign to Jack's eyes. Sarah watched Hawk intently, captivated by his quiet confidence. Her young heart yearned for reassurance, and Hawk's presence, though mysterious, strangely comforted her. She felt drawn toward his steady strength, sensing instinctively that beneath his quiet exterior lay compassion born of hardship, a sorrow not unlike Jack's own. Hawk mixed herbs expertly into hot water from the kettle, creating a potent, aromatic concoction. Jack observed silently, watching as Hawk carefully fed the liquid to Margaret. Minutes passed in tense silence until finally Margaret's breathing steadied slightly, colour gradually returning to her pale features. Sarah released a trembling breath. Hope reignited. "You've done this before," Jack said softly, his voice carrying grudging admiration. Hawk met his eyes directly. "Many times. Life and death dance close on the prairie." An uneasy truce formed quietly between the two men, fragile yet meaningful. Jack, still burdened by his past, struggled internally against deep-seated suspicion. Yet Hawk's clear competence demanded respect, challenging Jack's ingrained prejudices. Slowly, resentment softened into cautious trust, shaped by shared necessity. Days passed in tense yet purposeful cooperation. Hawk tended Margaret with quiet skill, Sarah assisting eagerly, comforted by his reassuring presence. Jack maintained constant vigilance, outwardly guarded yet quietly observing Hawk's gentle interactions with Sarah. The girl absorbed Hawk's wisdom effortlessly, drawn toward his steady calm. Jack observed, quietly impressed by Hawk's gentle patience, a virtue Jack himself had nearly forgotten. Evenings found Jack and Hawk seated outside the cabin, warmed by a small, crackling fire beneath endless prairie skies. At first, silence dominated, uncomfortable yet necessary. Gradually, though, stories emerged. Brief, hesitant narratives of past struggles, shared tentatively beneath starlit nights. Hawk spoke of his tribe's forced migration, losses suffered, and traditions nearly extinguished. Jack listened, recognizing parallels in his own buried grief. He quietly shared his losses. The family once loved and lost. Heartbreak lingering in every word. Through shared sorrow, a deeper understanding formed, bridging cultural divides slowly, meaningfully. Sarah often joined their nightly conversations, eyes wide with curiosity and admiration. She absorbed Hawk's wisdom eagerly, sensing in him echoes of the father she had lost. Jack noticed, at first painfully envious, yet increasingly grateful, for Hawk's influence. The warrior taught Sarah quiet resilience, strength tempered by compassion. Jack saw his own reflection subtly shifting, rigid barriers melting, replaced by humility born from acknowledging another's wisdom. One quiet evening, beneath stars bright enough to illuminate their faces clearly, Jack found himself expressing something deeply buried. "I didn't think I'd trust again. After losing everything, it seemed safer, simpler, to keep distant. But Sarah forced me open again." Hawk regarded Jack thoughtfully. "Trust isn't weakness. It's courage. Only brave hearts risk believing again after loss." Jack glanced toward the cabin, where Sarah slept peacefully beside her recovering mother. "She's stronger than I ever was," he admitted quietly. "She trusts without hesitation. I envy her bravery." Hawk nodded gently. "Children see clearly, without fear clouding judgment." Jack looked up, studying Hawk intently. "Yet she trusts you completely." Hawk's eyes softened with quiet pride. "Because she senses what your heart knows, but your mind fears to admit, that I am no enemy." Jack lowered his gaze, humility dawning painfully within. Perhaps you're right. Days stretched into weeks, Margaret's health steadily improving under Hawk's attentive care. Sarah bloomed beneath the guidance of both Jack and Hawk, maturing through adversity yet retaining innocence and bravery. Jack, gradually healed by newfound trust, slowly embraced vulnerability again, relinquishing stubborn isolation in favor of tentative hope. One bright afternoon, Hawk announced quietly, "She is strong now. The spirits guided us well." Margaret, sitting upright for the first time since the storm, gazed warmly at Hawk, gratitude glowing in her eyes. "Thank you for everything." Hawk bowed respectfully, humility clear in his silent acknowledgement. Jack stood nearby, sensing something profound shifting inside him. He'd learned painfully that vulnerability brought healing. Opening himself had restored something essential, previously buried beneath bitterness. Sarah hugged Hawk tightly, eyes sparkling with affection. "Don't go yet. We still need you." Hawk touched her cheek gently. "You're never alone, Sarah. Courage binds us now, stronger than distance." Jack approached slowly, offering his hand openly, symbolizing sincere respect. "You've taught me more than you realize, Hawk. My prejudice was my weakness. I see that clearly now." Hawk clasped Jack's hand firmly, trust fully realized in that single gesture. We each carry wounds. Trust heals deepest. Later, as the sun dipped low, painting skies in hues of amber and violet, Jack stood alone outside the cabin, heart profoundly moved by experiences shared. Memories of past losses lingered painfully, yet newfound relationships had begun quietly reshaping his soul. Sarah joined him silently, slipping her small hand trustingly into his. "You stayed," she whispered softly, her eyes wise beyond her years. "You could have left, but you stayed." Jack knelt down, gently meeting her gaze. "Because you reminded me how to trust again, Sarah. Because you believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Sarah smiled gently, eyes shining with quiet wisdom earned through adversity. "We're not alone anymore. We never have to be again." Jack held her close, grateful beyond words. Hawk stood quietly nearby, witnessing their bond, a silent guardian who had guided them both back to hope. Inside the cabin, Margaret rested peacefully, strength steadily returning. Outside, beneath endless prairie skies, bonds forged through hardship blossomed gently yet firmly, rooted deeply in courage, humility, and trust. Each heart now carried scars, but scars strengthened them. Reminders that trust and compassion held power greater than fear, stronger even than grief itself. As night fell softly over the prairie, Jack sensed clearly that trials still awaited, yet fear no longer ruled him. He'd rediscovered courage, not solitary and brittle, but shared, resilient and enduring. He stood silently with Sarah and Hawk beneath stars shimmering brilliantly overhead, hearts now bound by trust, strengthened immeasurably by shared wilderness and hard-earned companionship. Together, they awaited whatever storms might come next, united, resilient, forever changed by trust born bravely amidst life's unforgiving wilderness. The air was still, unnaturally quiet, as if the prairie itself held its breath. Margaret lay in bed, her strength slowly returning day by day, though shadows of her ordeal still lingered around her eyes. Jack watched her from the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable, but within him churned an unfamiliar mix of relief, guilt, and something tender he hadn't let himself name. Sarah played quietly on the floor nearby, her hands weaving bits of straw into shapes Hawk had shown her, their simplicity a comfort in days still too unpredictable. The silence broke suddenly with the sound of distant hooves. Jack's body snapped to attention. He stepped outside, squinting into the flat horizon. Dust lifted in the distance. Not from wind. This was purposeful, deliberate. Riders. His jaw tensed. He returned to the cabin, calm but urgent. "Sarah," he said quietly, "take your mama and stay inside. Don't come out unless I say." Sarah looked up, instantly understanding, not with fear, but with the same calm intensity that had carried her through the storm. She nodded and moved to her mother's side, helping her sit up. Jack took his rifle from the corner, checked it swiftly, and stepped back outside. 3 riders came into view. Dust-caked men in tattered coats, their movements too loose, too sure. Bandits, by the look of them. The lead rider, a lanky man with a scar across his cheek, smiled wide as he saw Jack. "Well, well," the man drawled. "Didn't expect to find company this far out. You a hospitable man, rancher?" Jack said nothing, but kept his rifle angled at the ground, his fingers poised. "Move on," he said evenly. "Ain't nothing here worth your trouble." The scarred man chuckled. "That's always a matter of perspective." Behind him, the other 2 shifted in their saddles. One had a crude shotgun across his lap. The other, younger and twitchy, kept glancing at the cabin. "We had a rough go," the scarred one continued. "Lost a few horses in the storm. Need food. Maybe some supplies. Maybe more." His grin widened. "Heard a woman scream out this way a few nights back. Could be that was yours?" Jack's heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. He saw where their eyes went. To the cabin, to the smoke curling from the chimney, to any sign of weakness. He stepped forward once, shoulders broad, blocking their view. "You're not getting past me," he said, voice low and resolute. "Turn around." The bandit with the shotgun spat. "You and what army?" Jack's answer came with the creak of a bowstring. Hawk emerged silently from the side of the barn, his longbow drawn and aimed with lethal precision. The twitchy rider jumped, his horse whinnying in alarm. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "Now that," he said slowly, "changes things." Jack said nothing more. The message was clear. Hawk didn't speak either, but his presence was enough. The 3 men hesitated, the tension held in a terrible stillness, one breath away from blood. Finally, the scarred man nodded. "We'll move on," he said, still smiling, but with a chill in his voice. "But the prairie's wide. Don't think this is the last you've seen of us." He turned his horse, the others following reluctantly. Jack and Hawk watched them until the riders faded into the horizon. When the dust settled, Jack let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Hawk lowered his bow. "They'll be back," Jack said. "Yes," Hawk replied. Inside the cabin, Sarah peered through the curtain, watching the 2 men. She didn't speak, but something in her gaze said she understood more than any child should. That night, the fire burned low. Margaret sat up beside it, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her skin was pale, but her voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Jack sat across from her, sharpening his knife methodically. Hawk leaned silently against the wall, his eyes closed but alert. "They'll come again," Margaret said softly, "and they won't ask twice." Jack nodded. "I know. We can't run, I can't. Not yet." "We won't," Jack replied. "We'll hold here, together." Margaret's eyes met his, and something passed between them, unspoken, but heavy with meaning. Hawk opened his eyes, looked to Sarah, then to Margaret. "They will strike when they see us weakest, but they do not understand what binds us." Sarah moved to Jack's side and leaned against him. He placed a protective hand on her head. "They'll find out," he said. The next 2 days were quiet, too quiet. The birds returned, the wind gentler, and the sun warm. but tension pulsed through the air. Jack trained Sarah how to load a rifle, how to signal with mirrors if danger approached. Hawk reinforced the barn, created traps at the perimeter, and hid supplies where only he and Jack knew. Margaret rested more easily but kept a pistol near her bedside. On the third day, the attack came. It began just after sundown. A distant crack, gunfire, sliced the calm. Jack sprang to his feet, rifle in hand. Sarah dashed to the cabin's inner room with her mother. Hawk disappeared into shadow, bow already knocked. The bandits came fast this time, 5 of them now, not 3. They weren't talking anymore. Their intent was clear. Jack took the first shot, dropping one before they reached cover. Hawk's arrows followed, precise and silent, deadly in their grace. Chaos exploded, flashes of muzzle fire, shouts and trampling boots. Smoke filled the air, thick with tension and gunpowder. One bandit managed to flank, reaching the cabin's back window. He raised his weapon, ready to shoot, until Margaret fired through the glass. Her bullet struck clean. He fell backward without a sound. Sarah covered her mother, protecting her with the smallness of her body and the enormity of her will. Jack fought like a man with everything to lose. He moved without hesitation, each shot measured, each movement precise. Hawkik Remotumud aimed silent, his arrows flying as if guided by the wind. Together they held the cabin like a fortress. Minutes passed like hours. Blood soaked the dirt. Screams rang out. Then silence. When it ended, Jack stood alone in the yard, smoke curling from his rifle barrel, chest heaving. Hawk emerged slowly from the brush, nodding once. All 5 attackers lay still on the ground. None had reached the door. Sarah peeked out, face tight but dry-eyed. "It's over?" Jack turned to her. For now. The aftermath was quiet, reverent. They buried the men away from the cabin, not out of mercy, but out of respect for the dead as a necessary ritual. Hawk murmured a prayer over them in his language, his voice low and steady. That evening, the stars returned brighter than they had been in many nights. Margaret sat near the fire, Sarah curled beside her, already half asleep. Jack cleaned his rifle methodically, slower than usual. Hawk tended the horses, his movements graceful, unhurried. "You saved us," Margaret said suddenly. Jack looked up. "We saved each other," she smiled. "You stayed. I thought after all you'd seen you wouldn't." Jack looked into the fire, his expression unreadable. "There was a time I would have walked away, but Sarah, she reminded me what it is to fight for something. You both did." Hawk returned then, standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the moonlight. "I will leave in the morning," he said simply. Margaret stood slowly. "You don't have to." "I do," he replied, his tone kind but resolute. "The path I walk isn't one meant to stay in one place. But I will return if you need me." Sarah ran to him and hugged him tightly. "Will I see you again?" He touched her hair gently. "I walk far, but the wind always carries news. When it matters most, I'll come." Jack approached, standing before him. "You have my respect, and my thanks." Hawk nodded once. "You've earned your own place in the land now. Guard it well." At dawn, Hawk was gone. No one saw him leave, but his footprints remained in the soil, leading toward the horizon. Sarah stood at the edge of the cabin, watching until the wind erased them. Months passed. Life returned to rhythm. Crops grew, Margaret grew stronger, and Sarah thrived. Jack built a new addition to the house, a proper room for Sarah. The ranch began to breathe again. One day, Margaret and Jack stood side by side on the porch. The sky stretched above them, wide and endless. "You ever think of leaving?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not anymore. This land, it's in my blood now." They stood in silence a while. Then slowly, Jack reached for her hand. she let him. Their love didn't bloom in grand declarations or fiery passion. It grew slowly, quietly, through trust, shared burdens, and resilience. They married the following spring, under a lone oak tree behind the cabin. Sarah stood proudly beside them, her smile radiant. The sun shone warmly that day, as if even the earth approved. And though laughter returned to the house, and joy found a place between the wooden walls, a thread of grief always remained, not unwelcome, just present, a reminder of what had been endured, of what had been lost and found again. Years later, Sarah would tell her own children about that night. The storm, the stranger, the warrior who came from the shadows, and the man who found his heart again. And they would listen, wide-eyed, not knowing how close it had all come to ending differently. Redemption had come not in a single moment, but in thousands, through choices, sacrifices, and silent strength, and resilience, that quiet, stubborn force, had carried them through. The wind still moved across the prairie, whispering of battles fought and won, of families made not by blood alone, but by bond and courage. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, a warrior moved with the dawn, carrying their story silently beneath the stars. If this story moved you, even a little, take a moment now to show your support. Like this video if you believe in the strength of resilience and the quiet power of compassion. Comment below. What moment in this story spoke to you the most? Have you ever faced a storm, literal or emotional, and come out stronger? Subscribe for more immersive storytelling that brings courage, connection, and redemption to life on the frontier and beyond. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. Until the next tale, stay brave, stay kind, and never stop believing in second chances.